Hello, BookTube. I've got a little mail for you. I haven't done mail in a while. I've opened all my packages off camera when that is explicitly forbidden. So I don't have much, but I thought I'd do this now so it doesn't slip my mind. I just rear into it without you. So we have a periodical and a couple of packages here, a package and a box. And the periodical is the new Harper's, which has a headline piece that is co-written by Ben Schwartz, which ought to be cause for joy. But this is the headline piece. The we here is the U.S. And I don't know what to say when I see something like this. I really don't know what to say. So this is going to be 15 pages of appeasement. This is going to be 15 pages of accommodationism. And ultimately, the question boils down to a world in which every country asks, sort of bowing, sort of cringingly, no direct eye contact, but every country asks, this foreign policy decision that I feel like making, that my country, we feel like making, Mr. Putin, would that decision be okay with you? Because we won't do it if it bothers you. That's what this is going to boil down to. Is that the world you want to live in? It's not the world that I want to live in. That's what this is going to boil down to. Imagine giving this a portentous black cover with big white letters asking such a self-evident question. Imagine doing that. Imagine, I'm sure it will be wonderfully written, but it will boil down to who gets to make foreign policy decisions for a country? The people of that country through their elected representatives, or a dictator in Russia? This piece is going to boil down to, well, NATO getting so close to Russian borders is really kind of bothering him. When the answer to that question is, who cares? Who cares if it's really kind of bothering him? I know, without reading a word of this article, I know that this is going to rehash all the points where, well, Putin has made it clear for years that the further eastward encroachment of NATO will be insufferable to him. He will view it as intolerable. He will respond with military force. He will respond with aggression. NATO is a voluntary organization, and the countries there should not need Vladimir Putin's permission to conduct their own international affairs. And it's not like he would stop with Ukraine. I'm amazed to think that has qualified now as the elephant in the room, but apparently it does. I guarantee you it won't come up in this article. It's not like he'll stop with Ukraine. Europe has actually been through this before with someone who said, I only want this little piece of this country, and only because it's crying out for me to liberate it. Okay. I bluffed you at the poker table, and you folded, and now I want this other piece. They're calling out to me. They are. And now I want this other piece. Actually, I'd kind of like the whole thing. I think now that the whole thing is calling out to me. You folded every other time. It's incomprehensible to me that I'm seeing this as a headliner on Harper's, but we'll see. We'll see. Benjamin Schwartz, boy, oh boy, is this going to test things, but he is always worth reading. But there's bound to be, let's see what the table of contents. There's got to be stuff in here other than that. Oh, God. The book's coverage is on Chuck Berry. A long piece on Chuck Berry. Okay, talk about a waste of space. This is, take the medicine to the white man. The Monroe Fantasy. Oh, all right, this may be a tough issue to read. Just in general, we will see. It's okay, but anyway, that's the periodical, Harper's. This question has a simple answer, and I don't know why we need to give 20,000 words to a question that has a simple answer. But maybe I'll learn something in the article. We will see. I'll report back. But then we have the packages, and we're going to try. We've got to do enough trouble with the periodical. So we're going to try to stay out of trouble with the packages. We've got an envelope and a box. Let's see what we have here. What is this? Oh, okay. Well, this is a new book that's coming out. This is coming out in October, and it's getting to me as a result of a little guilt trip on social media. So I guess Twitter is good for some things. I saw the wonderful publicist for this book dangling it like a bright and shiny object in front of a different person than me, when I know the subject better than any critic that this publicist is going to dangle the book in front of. I have read the subject text in the original. No other critic that he's going to dangle it in front of has done that. And I went to high school with the author. This is Robin Lane Fox's new book. I have praised Robin Lane Fox for 30 years, although he's not the author I'm talking about. And the book is called Homer and His Iliad. And this is, what have we got here? This is... Okay. Well, the cell sheet has been modified to the cell sheet has been modified to reflect the fact that I sort of corkscrewed this out of the publicist. But nevertheless, what have we got here? The Iliad is undoubtedly one of the world's great epic poems. Widely read today, this story of heroic battle and divine fate, set over the course of a few weeks during the Trojan War, explores timeless themes of war and morality, love and revenge, fate and free will. Yet questions surrounding its history remain. When was this poem composed? By whom? And why does it matter? Fascinating subjects. Even when you don't know anything about the history, and you're just reading the poems, you find yourself wondering, is this the same person who just wrote that? That's fascinating. In this book, the renowned classic scholar Robin Lane Fox aims to answer these questions. With 50 years of experience and extensive research, he argues that the Iliad was not, as some scholars claim, a composite work developed over centuries by a long tradition of poets. Instead, he concludes the poem as the result of the genius of a single oral poet, Homer, who regularly performed his work and chose to have it transcribed around 740 BC, a century earlier than previously supposed. Again, when you read the work, I'm not sassing back this author. I'm eager to read this book, but when you read the Iliad, that's all I'm saying. I mean, the author has classics research credentials as long as you're on, that you don't have and that I don't have. I would argue that this is a case in which you do not need a specialist. Read the Iliad as fast as you can. Read it. In other words, don't make it a summer project. Read it as you would a page-turning book. It is pretty page-turning. If you come out of a clear-eyed reading of the Iliad under the impression that the whole of it was written by one person, the same person, then I'm the czar of all the Russias. So, classical research notwithstanding, the book is the pudding. The proof is in the pudding. If you read the Iliad, the Odyssey is a different thing, but if you read the Iliad and think that portion and this portion were both written by the same person, then I'm the czar of all the Russias. So let's see here. I've already said that I love books that do this, that take received opinion and challenge it. I absolutely love that. I don't think that my opinion on this subject can be moved all that much because the poem speaks for itself, but I'm still going to love seeing it. Thousands and thousands of readers turn to the Iliad every year. Oh, I would love it if that were true. This publicist, well, he's a true believer, and a lot of readers would love that world to be true. That absolutely is not true. Again, the proof is in the pudding. Step outside your publishing job offices and talk to the next 10 people. See if any of you know what a book is, much less a record. But anyway, drawing on the author's historical expertise and sensitivity as a poetic reader. Now, that is true. Ordinarily, I would call that mere falderall, but Robin Lane Fox is a terrific writer. If you are at a used bookstore, a library book sale, or whatever, you see anything with his name on it, get it, because he's a terrific writer. I'm sure this will be a terrific book. Just from what I've been told, that this is the Iliad was all the work of one poet, and not only that, but from that description, what was it again? The result of the genius of a single poet who regularly performed his work and chose to have it transcribed around 740 BC, which is not only saying that the Iliad, as you read it, I'm not talking about experts here, including me. I'm talking about your reading experience. Not only is that claiming that it is all written by one person, but that basically that description is implying that the text is the finished copy. So not only written by one person, but transcribed at about the same time. In other words, that the Iliad that we're reading sort of has the author's stamp of approval as a finished work. Unbelievably untenable. Anyway, let's see here. So we were raving about the author. Here he offers a breathtaking tour of this magnificent text, examining every detail: its values, implicit and explicit, its characters, its women, its gods, even its horses, to reveal why the poem has endured for ages. Fantastic. The next step would be to read the author's bio. I know the author's bio, and I really don't want to be reminded of how old he is. He is probably retired. Am I going to find that out? Oh, yes, he is. He's an emeritus fellow at New College, Oxford. Oh, goodness. Okay. Then the final paragraph here. Let's celebrate the Iliad and all its epic glory by putting to rest the controversial speculations of its origins, so we can appreciate the poem with a thoughtful consideration of how it has captured audiences for millennia. You can certainly do that. You can put to rest all speculation and still just enjoy the poem. In 2023, in our vexed present era of grievance politics, of identity politics, putting forward a case that I believe is untenable. We will see if this author can convince me otherwise, but putting forward a case that this is the sole work of one writer, one poet who wrote it and had it transcribed around 740 BC, is one step away from saying that his wife did it and that she was BIPOC or whatever. I don't even know. All the sloganeering of the 21st century. But it doesn't matter anyway. The point of the sheet is absolutely correct. We can put aside all of this talk and just enjoy the poem. And you'll never have a more spirited guide to the Iliad than Robin Lane Fox, except perhaps me in any of the read-throughs that I've done of it on this channel. Please don't hesitate to be in touch to set up coverage of this important reassessment in the form of a review, excerpt, or interview with the author. Now, wouldn't that be fun? Could you stand it here on BookTube? A 40-minute Zoom interview with Robin Lane Fox and I just calling each other mean names? Oh, wouldn't that be fun? Okay, well, this comes out at the end of October, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to resist it. I do some advanced reading. I don't know that I'm going to be able to put this off. It's just too fascinating. It is as close to my wheelhouse as it's possible to get. I mean, it's mid-May. In 2 weeks, I reread the Iliad. I reread the Iliad every year. Wow, okay. Okay. Robin Lane Fox addresses the questions of the origin of this poem, drawing on a lifelong love and engagement with the poem. He argues for a place, a date, and a method for its composition, subjects of ongoing controversy, combining the details of expertise of a historian with a poetic reader's sensitivity. And he considers the hallmarks of the poem. Okay, fantastic. All right. Late October, you Iliad fans, you Homer fans, this has got to go on your list. Fantastic. Ooh, that idea of an interview with the author is very tempting. Well, what if I disagree with the book completely? Just on the face of it. I mean, the back of the book and the pub sheet both invoke Robin Lane Fox's readerly sensitivity. And that's because I think even a moderately sensitive reader would read the Iliad and think, well, okay, theories about the origin of this poem notwithstanding, this certainly is not the work of only one person. There are drastically different poetic sensibilities right next to each other, sometimes in the same book, in the same segment of the poem. There's no way that you could do that. You couldn't shift like that. I mean, we shall see. He could convince me. Homer and his Iliad. How fun is that? Pure proof that guilt-tripping people on social media can have positive benefits. And then we'll do the box, and then we'll be done. Although, there's no chance whatsoever that the box is going to be a book on the Iliad by Robin Lane Fox is about as close to a Steve's bullseye as you can get. This box would have to be, I don't even know, traveling in Italy with beagles, something like that, to be more of a Steve book. But let's see. I'm sure it will give it the old college try. Will it be close to a Steve book or really far away? Let's see what we have here. Okay, all right. Well, it's trying really, really hard. This really is the old college try to be even more of a Steve book than a book by Robin Lane Fox about Homer. This is a novel about Henry VIII. This is the finished copy of The King's Pleasure by Alison Weir, and that is supposed to be Henry. I don't know. I mean, you're what? Ballantine Books. You have a large group of people. You have a department for designing books. And you Tudor fans are going to be spotting problems right away with this cover, the neck ruff, the actual costume, the tapestry in the background, the way he looks. It's not like we don't have very good portraits. Well, anyway, this is Alison Weir. She is a historian who also writes historical fiction, and it's usually very, very good. Like Carol Erickson or now Dan Jones, sometimes historians can jump that fence and do really good work. And this is a nice, big, hefty thing. I didn't know it was going to be this long, but this is very much looking forward to this. It doesn't have a sheet, but I think this is a June release. The King's Pleasure, a historical novel, a Tudor fiction novel that is squarely about Henry instead of faffing around with the wives. At least I think. Let's see what we have here. Because Alison Weir did a whole series of novels, one each of all the wives. And I've made no secret on this channel of how tiresome I find that as a conceit. To just go through the wives over and over and over and over again. This guy came to the throne as a teenager. He made serious war with France. He reformed, he remade the church. He remade the civil government. He did a lot of things other than just treat women like trash. He did a lot of other things than that. But Alison Weir went through the wives one after another. I reviewed one of those books for the Christian Science Monitor. I think it might have been the first one, Catherine of Aragon. And then years went by, the books just kept coming out, the wives just kept getting discarded or beheaded. And I think I reviewed another one for the Christian Science Monitor. I think I reviewed two of those for the Monitor on two separate wives. But this is about the man himself. This is no longer about the wives. Let's see what we have here. Having completed her 6 Tudor Queens series of novels on the wives of Henry VIII, extensively researched and written from each queen's point of view, Alison Weir now gives Henry himself a voice, telling the story of his remarkable 38-year reign and his 6 marriages. Young Henry began his rule as a magnificent and chivalrous Renaissance prince who embodied every virtue. He had all the qualities to make the triumph of his kingship, yet we remember only the violence. Henry famously broke with the Pope, founding the Church of England and launching a religious revolution that divided his kingdom. He beheaded 2 of his wives and cast aside 2 others. He died a suspicious, obese, disease-riddled tyrant, old before his time. His reign is remembered as one of the dangerous intrigue and bloodshed, yet the truth is far more complex. The King's Pleasure brings to life the idealistic monarch who expanded Parliament, founded the Royal Navy, modernized medical training. Oh, how amazing! I was just doing this list. Composed music and poetry and patronized the arts. A passionate man in search of true love, he was stymied by the imperative to produce a male heir, as much a victim of circumstance as his unhappy wives. Had fate been kinder to him, the history of England would have been very different. History of the world would have been very different. Here is the story of the private man. To his contemporaries, he was a great king, a legend in his own lifetime, and he left an extraordinary legacy, a modern Britain. Oh my, how wonderful. All right, let's read the beginning. I can't resist. And since this is a finished copy, I'm pretty sure this is a June release. I'm going to get on this right away. In fact, I might read both of these tonight. I will read Why Are We in Ukraine first, and then with bile bubbling out of every pore and angry and wanting to punch a kitten, I will then settle down with these 2 books so that I calm down and enjoy myself. Let's see how this starts, though. I'm too curious not to see how this starts. So we get family trees and whatnot, and then we open. We get a prologue. Let's skip the prologue and just do chapter 1. Chapter 1 is set in 1503. He had cried for hours. Mother, his dearest mother, was dead. It had been the most hateful, dreadful news broken to him by Mrs. Luke, his old nurse. Not, thankfully, by father, who was too broken by his own grief. Harry could not have coped with witnessing the king's distress. He had enough to bear. He had wept and wept on Mrs. Luke's broad bosom, and now, aware that great boys of 11 were not supposed to give way to womanish tears, he struggled to compose himself and went to find his sisters, who were sitting desolately on the rug before the fire in Mother's bedchamber. He stared in horror at the bed, which had already been hung and draped with black velvet of mourning. His mother would never sleep here again. He would never more hear her sweet voice. Her sweet voice, Margaret of Beaufort. Oh my God. Feel her gentle arms around him, her golden boy. How truly she had loved him. How desperately sad to think of the empty years ahead without her. He could not damp down the great swell of sorrow that was rising within him. He sank to his knees by the bed and buried his head in his hands. He had loved her, revered her, adored her. Through her, he was the heir to the rightful royal line of England. She had been everything a queen should be, beautiful, kind, fruitful, charitable, open-handed, and devout. She had taught him his first prayers and his first letters, soothed his childish ills, and been a font of wise advice and comfort. And now she was gone. He could not bear it. His grandmother, the Lady Margaret, found him and lifted him up. Framed by her widow's wimple and black gable hood, her thin face was sad and drawn. Harry, you must rejoice that your dear mother is with God and be happy for her. It sounds like Margaret Beaufort. How can I? He burst out. I need her. How could God be so cruel as to take her away from me? Hush, child, you must not question God's will. She sat on the bed and drew him to her as Mary, not quite 7, and the beauty of the family, climbed on her lap and sat there, her lower lip trembling, and Margaret, 13 years old and normally willful and imperious, knelt at her feet looking lost. Your lady mother is now in heaven, looking down on you all and praying for you, grandmother told them. She would not want you to be sad. She is with Arthur. Even now, Harry felt the old familiar resentful jealousy of his brother rising in him. Whatever Arthur had, Henry had coveted, and when Arthur had died last year at the tender age of 15, Harry had suddenly had it all. He was now the Prince of Wales and heir to the throne, and he was betrothed to his brother's enchanting Spanish widow. One day he would be the King of England, and Catherine of Aragon would be his queen. But now Arthur, in heaven, had stolen one final march on him and was enjoying the greatest thing of all, their mother's presence. Okay, that's fairly gripping. Imagine calling Margaret Beaufort grandmother. Granny, what big teeth you have. Anyway, I think I'm going to dive right into this. I think we're going to dive right into both of these. In fact, let's see how Homer and his Iliad starts. Might as well. I've talked so much about it. Let's see. We'll skip the preface again. We'll skip the prologue as well. Let's go to chapter 1. How does chapter 1 start? The Iliad is more than 15,000 lines long. It is much longer than near contemporary Greek narrative poems, which stopped at 3,000 to 5,000 lines and never reached more than 7,000. But it is not unique among poems about heroic deeds composed in other cultures. In southwest India, one such poem, the poem of Siri, is still performed orally by specialized performers in the Tulu language. It is almost exactly as long as the Iliad and has women as its protagonists. In Central Asia, various heroic poems survive, versions of which extend to as many as 500,000 verses. The Iliad is distinctive for other reasons, prominent among which are the concentrated direction of its plot and the compression of its action's time span. Through its first 611 verses, I will begin by tracing these features. They are what texts now define as the Iliad's first book, identified by the Greek letter alpha and followed by 23 more, one for each letter of the Greek alphabet from alpha to omega. The origin of this division is disputed. All right, so he jumps right into material. Okay, he jumps right in. Great. The poet starts straight into his story without any introduction to the Trojan War and its 9 preceding years. It's the boldest of beginnings, as radical as young Orson Welles' decision to begin his film Citizen Kane at the end of its story. By specifying Achilles' wrath, Homer states that his subject is to be emotion, not just a sequence of actions or family's deeds across several generations. The wrath, he goes on, was a word which runs over into the start of his next verse. It is usually translated as accursed. But no god or man curses it, and I prefer to render it as damnable or even ruinous. It is a word of strong disapproval and is placed where Homer, performing, could emphasize it. You're saying Homer actually performed this as well. Oh, my. Okay. Oh, Lemony. Okay. All right. Well, I stand ready. I stand ready. So that is the mail. As Steve-centric a pair of books as you could possibly ask for. It's just the antidote I need to a Craven piece like this. Why are we in Ukraine? How about a corresponding question? What's the alternative? If you can live with the alternative, if you shake your head ruefully and say, well, it's the way it is. I don't like it, but I'm sure this article will do that. I'm sure this article will propose the alternative. There's only one alternative to this question. I'm sure that this article will ask that question. What is the alternative? And then endorse it. Anyway, so I'll read that, and then I will read these to soothe the savage breast. So there you go. Fantastic. All right. That was the mail. All right. That's lots of fun. Fantastic. 2 books only, but what 2 books? So I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.